Hey guys, it's Keanu, my review for The Matrix Resurrections. And this is yet another one of those movies that is very hard to talk about without delving into spoilers, so really all I'm going to say is that after the events of Matrix Revolutions, somehow Neo and Trinity have both ended up trapped inside the Matrix. Basically, Neo comes to realize what is going on and realizes that he really needs to be the one to pull her out and take on the greater evil that threatens all of them. So Matrix Resurrections, I was very excited for this film. Now, look, going into this, I had really only seen the first Matrix, which obviously is one of the best films ever made. It is just one of the it's one of those films that like really define the action genre, but also like completely, I think, just repurposed it. It showed things that weren't a possibility, and you know, I still think that film is incredibly special even today. I mean, just the things that that film was able to do in terms of effects and action sequences, you know, it really did pave the way for some of the best action films we have today, and we really do thank The Matrix for that. The sequels, I did not watch until before this movie. I saw this movie before I left Canada, actually, the day before I left. This was the last movie I watched. So me and my girlfriend, you know, we watched 2 and 3. And needless to say, I'm not a huge fan of the sequels. I think 2 is needlessly complicated, but also just not very interesting in terms of story. There's a lot going on, and a lot of which I don't really care about. There's a lot of new characters introduced and things like that, and I'm just not really a fan of a lot of that stuff. But I think 3 is a little bit better than people do give it credit for. It's not a bad send-off. I think Neo, especially, his story is a lot more interesting with what they do, and I do like the way they do wrap things up. The final fight between him and Agent Smith is honestly really well done. And I do think it ends on a pretty okay note, but neither of those sequels are films that I felt like had to exist. Neither of those movies I feel like justified their existence all that well. So going into Resurrections, I was just really hoping that this could be a good sequel, that I can finally get a film that shows me, why do we need a Matrix sequel? Why did this need to continue on? Because prior to, you know, this film, I just didn't see a reason for it. I felt like the first one was the only one that needed to exist. It's perfect. There's no reason to continue. Why would you continue? So I was really hoping this film would prove that to me. And I have to say, I was really, really pleased with this film. I know a lot of people are very much dunking on this film. It's very divisive in that way, along with like a dozen other movies this month that are divisive, but it's definitely one of the most, I would say. But for me, I found this to be such a creative and innovative approach to a sequel that the leagues of which we really haven't ever seen before. It really is kind of like something different that I don't think a lot of people are going to expect, but it is really all the better for it. And we're just getting into right now, starting off with the cast. And going into this film, that was definitely something I was very excited about. I thought everyone looked like they were going to do a really great job here. I really like, and I really do like the majority of this cast. I think basically everyone does a great job. But let's first talk about Keanu Reeves, who, you know, he's played Neo for a long time now. But obviously it's been a while since he's played this character. And I have to say, not only does he get right back into it, but this might just be his best performance yet as the character, because there's so much more that Neo is dealing with in this film. Obviously, throughout a good majority of it, he is very much confused. He doesn't know a lot of what's going on, and I really liked seeing that. I like seeing a Neo that is not really ahead of the curve. He's very perplexed throughout a majority of this film, and you can see how that is really weighing on him, and I think Reeves does a really strong job with that. But when he eventually does come to realize what's going on, it becomes a really emotional performance that I thought worked really well for him as a character, and I thought really did play to Keanu Reeves' strengths in that way. I feel like as an actor, he doesn't get enough credit a lot of the time because he's just a really likable guy and things like that, and people just like watching Keanu Reeves, but we forget that when he is required to like go the extra mile and like really give some emotional beats, he really does kill it, and he absolutely nails it here. Everything he does when it comes to the character of Neo and the journey that he goes on, I thought Reeves just did all of that perfectly, and it really did feel like he just got right back into this character, and I really loved what he ended up doing. Similar to how Neo has plugged back into the Matrix, I felt like Reeves just plugged right back into this role and really felt like he had never left, and I really love what he ended up doing here. Carrie-Anne Moss as well is very good as Trini here. Now, I will say she's not in this movie as much as you might be expecting, but I do think she did a really solid job here. I really like seeing her back in the role. Once again, it really does feel like she just got right back into it, and I think the chemistry between these two is maybe the best that it's ever been. It just feels so natural, and it really just feels like they have this very close connection, which they do, and you really do feel it in this movie, and I thought both of them really are like the emotional anchors of this film overall. They really are the thing that I think grounds this film, and I think regardless if you like this movie or not, I do think you will be very pleased by their performances overall. But now we got to get to the rest of the cast here, because the majority of this cast obviously are newcomers, and I think one of the biggest things people are very skeptical about is Yahya Abdul-Mateen II. Obviously, he is stepping into the shoes of Lawrence Fishburne, and right off the bat, that is an impossible task. Like, I'll just say that right now. Like, anything that he did in this movie, there was no possible way it was going to surpass what Fishburne did, because that role is iconic. I feel like his role is as iconic as Keanu Reeves, as Carrie-Anne Moss. Having anyone step into his shoes is just a real challenge in that way, because that role is one that I feel is irreplaceable. I feel like Lawrence Fishburne was perfectly cast there and understood the very, sort of like mechanical demeanor of Morpheus well, but then also the badassery of him well. I think he balanced those two things very well here. And without spoiling too much, this is a very different role. Morpheus is very different in this movie, and I do applaud Yahya for going there. I like that he didn't just try to redo what Lawrence Fishburne did. He very much is doing his own thing here. Regardless of how you feel, I genuinely appreciate it. I like the fact that he was trying to do something different. This Morpheus is a lot more of a wisecracker in that way, and I really did like that. I liked what Yahya Abdul ended up doing with this character. I think he was a worthy replacement overall, and I liked what he ended up doing in this film. So I'm not going to try to say like he's better than Lawrence Fishburne, because like I said, there is no replacing him. But I do think overall, for what he does in this film, I think I'm overall satisfied with his performance here. But I have to say, besides Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne Moss, the big standout of this movie for me is absolutely Jessica Henwick, who, my God, I mean, the more that she continues to go on as an actress, the more she becomes this just very dynamic action star, and I really love what I've been seeing from her between this and Iron Fist. Obviously, I really do love what we've been getting from Jessica Henwick lately, and I think she absolutely kills it in this role as Bugs. Bugs is someone who has kind of assumed the role that Neo did. She in a way is like the new Neo, and she's also very much like inspired by him, and Henwick portrays this character really well. You understand how she is very apprehensive about stepping into those shoes, but she also is so determined with this mission, with what she's doing, and I really loved her character here. I think she just did, and I really liked her performance here. I think she really did a fantastic job in this role, and I think she carries this movie very nicely. She definitely is a very major character in this film, and I really liked what she ended up doing here, so I was a very big fan of her overall. And then Jada Pinkett Smith, I liked a lot more in this movie. I touched upon before how in the Matrix sequels, I didn't really care about most of the new characters, Nairobi being one of them. I just never really got into her, but here, I like her a lot more. She assumes a different kind of role in this movie. She's kind of in this position of power now, and we kind of start to see like how Zion has changed since then, and I really liked what she ended up doing. I thought she worked very well in that role, sort of like this secondary mentor to Neo when Morpheus isn't around, and I really liked her overall, so I thought she did a really good job. And then two performances that I cannot really talk about because it kind of spoils what their role is, but Neil Patrick Harris and Jonathan Groff are both incredible in this movie. And that's really all I can say. I can't say much more about either of them, but both of them were incredible here. Neil Patrick Harris especially had a lot more to do than I expected, and he was very much made for this role, as was Jonathan Groff. I thought they both did a fantastic job here. They were not easy roles to pull off, but I think they really did kill them. They were both just so charismatic, but also giving the roles the sort of like gravitas that it really did need. And I really did love what both of them ended up doing here. I think this entire cast, everyone really just killed it here. All right, but now let's get to the directing and the writing, because that's the other thing that I think is really interesting when it comes to this film. Obviously, first three Matrix films, it was the Wachowski sisters that directed it, but this time around, we only have one Wachowski sister. We only have Lana taking on this film, and from what I understand, this was deliberate. This was something that she did because she was coping over the loss of her mother, and she kind of wanted to, cope with that by writing this film, and I think that's a really noble thing. I didn't know that until other people were discussing it, and I think that kind of gives this film this personal touch that I really did need, and you can see that it was this passion project for her. And one, I'm very happy that she was able to come back, because I also read an article that said this movie would have gone on with or without her, so I'm very happy that she was able to come back. But two, because of the fact that Lana is on her own now, she basically has an opportunity to kind of just do whatever she wants at this point, to really just craft the most different kind of Matrix film that she really can. And I really do like that a lot. I like that she was given an opportunity to kind of just make it her own film and not have to rely on what we've already seen. And that's exactly what she did here. This is nothing like the other Matrix films, and I really like that a lot. I think for the previous two sequels, which were very similar in a lot of ways, I think that she's able to really make something very ambitious and really explores just the kind of experimental director that she is. I mean, this movie gets really weird, and I'm really happy that she ended up going there. The one thing that's probably the thing that's gonna shock people the most is that half of this movie is basically like this meta comedy of sorts, and that seems very off-putting. That doesn't really seem like it works in a Matrix film, but she finds a way to really make it work, and I really liked what she ended up doing here. I think the way that she incorporates the comedy, it doesn't feel forced. It doesn't feel like she is trying too hard to do something different. I really did feel like this fit naturally in with the story that is being told. So then when we get to those more dramatic aspects, I thought overall she did a really good job with that. And again, I really did enjoy her directing here. I think that's something that is really well done with this film. This movie, without spoiling too much, it's very much like two movies in one. Like I said, I think that first half is more of this meta comedy of sorts, which I'll get into, but the rest of this movie is practically a love story, and I think that's something else that she sells very well. So I think the emotion and the humor, all of that is presented in a very natural way, and I really love the way that Lana ended up directing this film. But let's get into the writing here, because that's something else that I think is really well done when it comes to this film, is that, we get so many forced sequels within Hollywood these days. I think just this year alone, we've seen about half a dozen of them where it's did we really need this? Does this need to exist? And so what's really clever about this movie, without getting into, is that the first half of this movie is literally trying to tell you why this film should exist. It is literally this meta commentary on trying to justify its existence, and it works really well. You can see that Wachowski is really trying to poke fun at just how much Hollywood likes to, shoehorn churn out all these sequels and things like that, and I thought that was really well done in this movie. I liked how this film is kind of this deconstruction of Hollywood blockbusters, and again, it sounds very forceful, it sounds kind of dumb, but I think when you watch the film and see how it's implemented, I think it actually works very well. I was laughing a lot in this movie, more than I really did expect to, and I really did enjoy that a lot. I liked what this movie ended up doing, and it's this really well done satire that I think takes this franchise in this very like fresh direction, and that's something I really do love seeing, because I feel like that's something that the sequels very much did lack. Both of the sequels, they just felt a little too familiar. It didn't really feel like they tried to do anything to separate from that first film, other than they just got a lot more overly convoluted and kind of bland. Whereas this film is legitimately doing things to change up, this franchise, to change things, and a lot of people have compared it, I think, to The Last Jedi, and I actually think it's a pretty apt comparison, because similar to that movie, this film is doing a lot of risky things, and it is very much like a you either go with it or you don't type of movie. Like, this either is going to work for you or it's going to crumble at the seams, and it really just comes down to how you feel, and that's something I really do appreciate, is that they really do go for it here. And I think in a film like this that really does have a lot to showcase. I mean, it's coming out literally 20 years after the previous entry. I mean, there's a lot this film needs to do, and I really liked this unconventional way to go about it. I think as far as films of the 90s that are getting sequels, this is by far one of the better attempts that I've seen, for sure. And I think just this first half alone is enough a reason to recommend this movie. But then when we get to the second half, I think that's really the make it or break it point of the movie for people. I think if you're able to get with what's going on, I think you'll be okay with that. But obviously there's a lot of people that aren't able to. I was perfectly fine with the second half of this movie. I thought the way they tied in the familiarity worked really well here, because eventually we do come to realize what's going on. It becomes a little bit more of a traditional Matrix movie in that way, but I thought it still worked very well. And I think what really works well about it is that this film cares a lot more about these characters, especially Neo and Trinity. Without getting into too much, if I really had to classify this film as one thing, it's a love story. It really is. A lot of this movie is trying to get you to really buy into the romance between Neo and Trinity, which I felt was needed, because I think in the sequels, that's something that always felt shoehorned into me. It's something that they wanted to do because they wanted to deepen those characters. They didn't know what else to do with them, so they shoved them into a romance, and this film really does give that a purpose. It gets you to really understand why these two care so much about each other, why they have this love for each other, and I think all of that is very well implemented in this film, and I thought that the way that was tied together was really well done, and understanding the way that Neo feels about Trinity and why this mission matters so much to him really kind of like ups the stakes of this film, and I thought they did a really strong job with that. So I thought that that second half still worked really well. The thing that some people are going to have an issue is that there is a lot of exposition in this movie, and there has been a lot of exposition in the other two films. The difference is here, I think it's needed. I very much think it's needed. With everything that's going on, there's a lot to explain. It makes sense to kind of take a pause and just try to wrap your head around everything, because the other two films, it's very much like just expository scene of dialogue, and this movie's not really like that at all. There are scenes where there is quite a bit of exposition, but like I said, I think it's all needed because we need to catch up with these characters. We need to see what they've been up to, and we do get to see that here. We get to see, the progression of Zion. How much has Zion advanced since the events of Revolutions? What did Neo and Trinity's sacrifices, how did that help move Zion forward? We get to see that here. What has the world overall been like since Neo and Trinity went away? We get to see that here. The new characters, we get to dive a bit deeper into them. What is their essential purpose? We do get to see that. So there is a lot, we have a different Morpheus. Why is there a new form of Morpheus and things like that? So there is a lot more to explain in this film. Because of that, I don't really have a problem with the expository dialogue. Well, normally that would be an issue for me and was an issue in the previous two films. It's really not here because I think overall it is warranted. And not only that, I do think it pays off in the end. I think all of the exposition exposition that we get makes sense with where this film ends up going, which, let me just say, that's something else that really impressed me about this film. There's a lot of directions in this film that at first I thought were really predictable. There's one character especially, I'm like, I know what they're doing. Like, it's so obvious what they're doing with this character. I don't know why they're trying to keep this such a mystery. And, you know, I thought I knew what they were going to do. And then this character came back and I was like, oh my God, they're actually doing something really different with this character. And I really liked that a lot. I liked that they tried to take this character in a new direction. And I thought that worked very well with the film. And when we actually realize, you know, what's happening with all this, who's behind everything, what's caused this all to happen, it wasn't exactly what I was expecting, and it kind of recontextualized the film as a whole, and I really did love that overall. I think it really did change things for the better, and I think it made the film that much more impressive that they were able to pull this off, and so I really did enjoy a lot of the writing here. I think that it all balances very well, and I think just in general, they found a lot of ways to keep things fresh and exciting, and I think that's very hard to do with a fourth film. And just the fact they were able to come up with something even slightly different, I think is very much impressive, and I think is very much an achievement in that way. So that's something that I was definitely very happy about. And then the new characters as well. Like I said, you know, besides Neo and Trini and also, you know, Morpheus and Nairobi, there's a lot of new characters within this film. And I think overall, most of them do serve a really strong purpose. Bugs in particular, as I said, is a character I really did gravitate a lot towards. She very much is inspired by Neo, and I think that the bond that she strikes up with a lot of these characters is really well done. Bugs is a character I really did enjoy following. I liked getting into her backstory a little bit more, and I thought that Henwick not only played that character very well, but I think the character overall was very well written, so I really enjoyed her in this film a lot. I overall really enjoyed a lot of the writing. Let's get into cinematography here, because that's something that has always been a staple of this franchise. I think even in the subpar sequels, the action was still very strong in those movies, and I think that is still very much the case here. Yes, there's a little bit more shaky cam and things like that going on, but I think there's some still really strong action set pieces here. There's one in a warehouse especially. It was very intense the way it ended up playing out, and I definitely did appreciate that, but I also liked how gradual a lot of these action sequences were. This isn't one of those films where the action sequences take up half of the movie. The film actually really does take its time in getting you to those action set pieces, so once we eventually get there, I think that they were that much more thrilling to watch, and I enjoyed the action sequences a lot in this movie. I think the look and feel of everything as well, they do a really good job in constructing the Matrix and really getting you back into the world. I think the cinematography is just very strong in this movie, and I don't really have many issues with it at all. The score as well, I really enjoyed here. From what I understand, the score is composed by people who do not have experience with Matrix films, and it does not show at all, because I think they do a really good job at making this film feel familiar, but also adding their own unique sound to it, and that's something that I really did appreciate. And the editing. This is the longest entry in the Matrix franchise, and I really didn't feel the length at all. This movie did kind of fly by for me, and I thought as a whole they did a really good job with the pacing here. That being said, this is not a perfect movie by any means. There definitely are some things that do very much bring it down. One of them being is that there is a lot of footage in this film. There are many times in this movie where they will cut back to what is clearly just, you know, footage from the archive footage from the previous 3 entries, and I understood the purpose of it, but it did start to get a little tedious after a while. I was like, okay, I get what you're doing, and I wish they would have maybe eased up on that a bit. I think if they would have lessened it, it would have still gotten the message across in just a little bit more of an interesting way than just literally showing the footage. I got a little bit tired of that. Also, I think my larger issue with this movie is that Morpheus as a character, I already talked about how I appreciate the fact that he is different in this movie. I like that Yahya Abdul-Mateen II tried to do some different things with him. He is a lot more laid back. Like I said, he's a lot more of a jokester in this movie, and I enjoyed that quite a bit. There's some really fun things that he does with that character. But the thing I always appreciate about Morpheus in the original films is that, yes, he was this mentor of sorts, but he also, a lot of the time, got in on the action. He was just as much affected by this mission as Neo and Trinity were, and anyone else that was, along for the ride. Here, I didn't really feel that way. I felt like Morpheus overall, they just didn't really do enough with him. He has some really good scenes. There's one scene especially where I think he really gets to show his potential as this character, but as a whole, I just didn't feel they did enough with Morpheus to overall make an impression. I think that from what I saw of Yahya Abdul-Mateen II, he did a good job, but I thought as a whole, they just didn't really do enough with this character. I thought he was kind of underused in this movie. There's a portion where he kind of goes away for a bit, and I just wanted more from him. So I think they definitely could have done more when it came to that character overall. And I will say there are some new characters introduced in this movie that I just wasn't big on. I felt that they could have expanded on them a bit more and done a little bit, and maybe, reworked some things, and I think that would have made the film that much better overall. But like I said, for what this is, I think this is a very effective sequel. The ending of this movie especially is legitimately beautiful. I really liked the way this wrapped up, and I think if this is the point where the series does end, because, from box office results, I don't see this film getting a sequel. I think they even announced that they're probably done after this. I don't think this is a bad way to wrap things up. I think this overall is a very satisfying ending that ends on this, like I said, really just beautiful and very heartfelt note, and that's something I really did appreciate. Ultimately, The Matrix Resurrections is just a really well done sequel. Yes, it's very ambitious. Yes, it goes into a lot of uncharted territory, but I really did appreciate just how unique and fresh this film really was. Lana Wachowski's passion for directing, I think, has really never been stronger than it is in this movie. You really did feel like she got right back into it, as did Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne. I thought they both did an amazing job here. Jessica Henwick is a big standout, as well as Neil Patrick Harris and Jonathan Groff. The movie is both very funny, but then gets very thrilling once we start to incorporate those Matrix elements. I think there's some really strong action sequences here. I think there's some really cool things they do with this world, and I think for a franchise that pretty much just didn't really need to exist, I think this film does enough to where finally it gives a purpose for this to be a thing. It gives me a reason to actually care about these sequels, and that's a feat that the other two films were unable to pull off, and that's something that I really do appreciate when it comes to this film. Yes, there are some ideas that I don't think work quite as well as they wanted them to, but as a whole, I think this film was very satisfying overall. This is the kind of legacy sequel that I really do want to see more of. I don't want to see sequels that are just trying to do the same thing as the previous film. We've seen way too much of that. I want something more like this. I want something that's really out there. I want something that's really different, and I think this film very much did achieve that overall. No, it's not going to be for everyone, but I think for me, this film was the perfect blend of both the old and the new, and I very much did love that. So overall, I am going to give The Matrix Resurrections an A-. But over, guys, to my review of The Matrix Resurrections. Let me know if you guys saw this. Morale, if your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.